Good evening, everybody. Derek Michaud here, and it's time to go flush in the pocket. No guest tonight. That's all right, and it's not going to be that long, but we will be talking about our next guest, or one, not next guest. Our next guest is Wes Malott, happening this Monday. So that's going to be great. Can't wait for that. So Tom Smallwood was supposed to be joining us last night, but something happened. Again, I'm not going to get into it. I know what's going on, but I mean, it's a family matter, and he's one of my good friends, and he was nice enough to let me know what's going on. But for you people out there, just keep the Smallwood family in your thoughts, and everything's all right. Just we will be talking to Tom Smallwood another time. All right. So this is a guest announcement, and it's also, and feel free to jump in on the chat. It's also I'm gonna recap, why does Flush in the Pocket exist? All right. So I have been bowling my whole life, it seems. I've been bowling competitively since I was 13 years old. Actually, let's scratch that. We're going to say 12, because I joined my first league at Heritage Bowling Center in Herman, Maine. It's kind of like on the Herman-Bangor line, if you will, in 1993. September 11, 1993 was when I joined my first bowling league. And, I loved Heritage Bowling Center way back in the day. You had 20 lanes straight across, and it was an awesome center. It really, really was. And then eventually, they were sold to some other people, and now it's the sports arena, and now it's not even sanctioned by the USBC, so you couldn't even host a tournament there or anything like that. They just want open bowlers, no league bowlers, nothing like that. So, yeah, okay. Sorry to see that place do that, but I mean, it is what it is. So, as I'm growing up, I am falling in love with the sport of bowling more and more each day, each year, each whatever. You know what I mean? I first went bowling, actually, when I was 4 years old, and I went candlepin bowling in Madawaska, Maine, at the Handy Children's Center. They had a little outing, and we all went bowling. Well, the Handy Children's Center in Madawaska, or wherever it was, actually it was Madawaska, where I went to preschool. So we had a bowling outing, and candlepin is louder than 10-pin. I always liken it to 80 Dave Travers at the National Bowling Stadium, right? Dave, he throws loud strikes, or did in the day. I don't know how he's doing now. Hopefully he's well, but candlepin's louder than 10-pin. So the noise was so loud, I had to be taken out. It is what it is. And then 4 years later, I convinced my dad to take me bowling. He does. And, I just was like, I like this, and I want to do this more and more and more and more. And then I came home, and I was trying to find it on TV. And we would go to my Aunt Claire and Aunt Elsie's house in Auburn, Maine, a lot when they were alive. They died in 1994 at 94 years old. And they would, as the adults are sitting around talking, I'm sitting in a room wherever watching bowling. And I don't know who I'm watching. I don't know, maybe I'm watching Pete Weber and I don't realize it's Pete Weber. But as I'm getting older, I'm learning the names. I'm actually paying attention to the names. And it was really cool. I loved watching bowling on TV. I liked watching candlepin bowling on TV. I watched 5-pin bowling on TV. I watched 10-pin bowling on TV. And I watched duckpin bowling on TV. So, I love the sport of bowling. So and I know there are people like, tell us who the guest announcement is. That's not that easy. Come on. But anyway, as I'm growing up and I'm falling in love with the sport more and more and more. All right. And when I start realizing that there are podcasts and people are doing podcasts. You had, let's see, who was the first podcast I've seen? I honestly think it was the Bone and Zono Zone was one of the first. No, scratch that. The first podcast I saw was the one with Mike Flanagan and Matthew Farber. And I loved that. I really did. It was the I don't know. It was just I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was great. It was a lot of fun to watch them, and they had bowlers and it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I always would try to get on these podcasts. Hey guys, I'd love to, get on your podcast someday and whatnot. And it was just nobody was biting. And then Andrew Pfeffer, welcomed it. He says, if you want to be on Bowling with the Pfeff, email bowlingwiththepfeff at yahoo.com and tell us your bowling story. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll try that. So Andrew Pfeffer and I want to say last year or so, became I was on his show in 2022 for the first time, and we actually I consider him a dear friend now, and he's just a really good guy. So you had Bowling with the Pfeff, then you had Straight Up Five with Johnny Petraglia Jr. I love that show, I really do. You have Sweep the Rack with Big Mike and Brooklyn Rob. You have Bone and Zano with Mike Val and Justin Bone. Now Mike Val doing over the cap, and you have all these podcasts. So I'm like, nobody's putting me on their podcast. You know what? That's all right. That is perfectly fine. Listen, I don't want to be on your podcast unless you think I'm a good fit for your podcast. If you don't, by all means, I will be a fan. But good luck with your podcast, absolutely. So I was like, I want to talk about bowling when I want to talk about bowling. So that's why, and a lot of people were saying, geez, Derek, you should start your own podcast. I don't know. I don't know what it would be called. I don't know if I would do a good job. I don't know how to do it necessarily. And then I have this idea, either the 10 in the pit, or I was like, 10 in the pit. I feel like people already have that. Then I was like, Flush in the Pocket podcast. There you go. So the first guest I ever had was Andrew Pfeffer, and I wanted to do that because I knew, I just knew. Hang on one second, actually. Let me. There you go. I knew that Andrew was a good friend of mine, and he'd be a great first guest because I wanted to talk about the PBA. I wanted to get in there, and I wanted to recap the last couple seasons, and that is actually hard to do. Even with my memory, because not a lot of people have the same memory that I do, and that's okay. I'm not knocking anybody. It's just a thing that is a fact. Nobody remembers everything all the time. And nobody has a memory. If I was to go to Parker Bone and be like, hey, what were you doing on let's get what were you doing on March 15, 1997? He'd probably, I don't know, maybe he would know that was, the showboat show in Las Vegas. But anyway, so not everybody has the same memory that I do. It doesn't make me better than you or anything like that. It's just a fact. So, yeah, there it is. Now, with my memory and with encouragement from other people, everybody was like, you know what? You should do your own bowling podcast. And Andrew was my first guest, and I thought it was great. You had to come up with a list of questions. I can't just have a guest on right now. Let's say if I was to have, let's pick another name. Say if Danny Wiseman, right? Let's say I was interviewing him right now, right? Let's say he was in this studio. I can't just be like, all right, Danny, so how'd you start bowling? I pretty much memorize the questions now that I ask because it's the same questions for every guest. And so that's why you write everything down. Now, because nobody was having me on And then I start my own and I have Andrew on. And then I was like, all right. So then I said, geez, Parker, why don't you come on? Would you come on and do an episode with me? Yeah, sure. Yeah. When do you want me? And I was like, so he's the first pro bowler I ever interviewed. So I was like, what kind of questions should I ask him? And then that's when the questions were born. The same questions that I ask every single pro. Favorite tour stop, least favorite tour stop. Back when I interviewed Parker, I said, who was your easiest opponent? Well, nobody's easy. Who was your toughest opponent? That's probably a little bit more of a, who's your toughest opponent, and so it was one of those things. It was one of those things that it was like, why not ask the same questions to every pro? Because there's only so many questions you can ask somebody. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? Like if I was to have somebody that had nothing to do with bowling on here, that had nothing to do with anything, right? Like let's say if I was just a random Joe on here, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite this, that, and it's just kind of a dumb podcast. So that's why I ask the same questions to every pro. And I love what I do. And the reason I took it the way I did after I interviewed Parker, I said, you know what? I need to interview any pro that'll be interviewed. So I wrote a post and I tagged a lot of pros and I said, listen, I have this podcast. It was very new at the time. And you don't want to say a new podcast. You want to say, I have this bowling podcast called Flush in the Pocket, and I would love to talk to you about your amazing career. Now, you have to say amazing career. I'm going to tell you why. A lot of these pros that are retired, right? Maybe that didn't do as well as others. If you make them feel great about themselves, well, you're better. You have a better chance of getting them on your podcast. All right. So let's say, for example, I talked to Don Moser. Now, he probably doesn't think he had an amazing career, but he's important to me because, I watched him bowl on TV. And the reason I call pro bowlers heroes is because I watched them on TV and I never thought that I would ever meet them. And it's just, I get it. Everybody puts their shirt on the same way, takes their shirt off the same way, puts their pants on, takes their clothes off the same way, puts their clothes on the same way. I'm well aware of that. I'm well aware. And by the way, uh, by the way, I am very sorry I forgot to mention that this is sponsored by Brunswick or brought to you by Brunswick, sponsored by Just in Time Recreation. And they are located at 24 Mollison Way in Lewiston, Maine, 207-786-2695, justintimebowl.com. Justin and Samantha do amazing things. They have birthday parties. They have all this. And, they have birthday parties. They have bowling. They have food. Amazing, amazing place. justintimebowl.com. Just in Time Recreation in Lewiston, Maine. I apologize for being on for 14 minutes and not mentioning them. So check them out. Now, when you talk to somebody, you want to make them feel, you really do. You want to make them feel good about themselves. Don Moser, when I talk to him, he says, I don't know if I'm relevant. I don't know why would anybody want to talk to me? I said, well, you're important to me, man, because you did this and whatever. And I love watching bowling and I love talking to bowlers. I never thought in my life that I would meet any of them. And now because of Facebook, I'm talking to a ton of them. Even I have a ton of them on my Facebook. I probably don't talk to a lot of them, but the fact that they're on and they let me, they let me interview them. That just meant a lot to me. So Flush in the Pocket exists because it's an excuse to talk to pro bowlers. Okay. So thank everybody who has been on Flush in the Pocket. And it really means a lot. Thank you to Liz Johnson. Liz Johnson, she could do anything with her life. She could do anything with her time. I shouldn't say life, I should say time. She does not have to talk to somebody like me. But the fact that she chose to do it, it really meant a lot. And it's not that these aren't quick podcasts. I don't want them to be quick podcasts. I don't necessarily need 4 hours like I did with Ernie Schlegel, but I would love a good podcast, a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if you'll allow it. So I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you. Now, so I started Flush in the Pocket as an excuse to talk to professional bowlers about their amazing career and tell them why they mean a lot to me. All right. Should they be put on a pedestal, the pedestal that I put them on? Yeah, probably. I don't know. But I just I put him there, okay? But anyway, so getting to tonight's guest, it's going to be a pretty awesome, or not the tonight's guest announcement, I should say. Back in 2000 on Halloween night, it was a Tuesday night. The Pro Bowlers tour was on Tuesday nights in the fall from in the year 2000. They also did it in 2001 and 2002. 2002 was the last time that. Give me a second. Let me think about that. 2001, actually. The beginning of 2001 in the fall, in October, was the last time that the PBA had a week night telecast in the fall. Because starting in 2002, when they split the seasons, they did 20 week seasons. They had 10 weeks from, I want to say, October to December, and then January to March was the second half. So you had 01, 02. Well, that started the very first Sunday telecast in the fall was the Long Island Open at Windsor Locks, Connecticut, won by Tommy DeLutz Jr. So in 2000 at Woodland Bowl, which is now Royal Pin Woodland, rest in peace, Jim Doty. He owned the place. There was a telecast, the Indianapolis Open on Halloween night. Remember Marshall Holman and Phil Ferguson? They had these silly Halloween costumes. They were just having fun. Not on their face, but on their hands. It was like puppets or whatever. It was cool. On that telecast, you had Chris Barnes. You had Randy Peterson. You had Norm Zook. You had Eugene McCune. You had Jeff Zaffino. You had Walter Ray Williams Jr. You had Doug Kent. And you had Brian Voss. So one of those is my next guest. And the winner is Doug Kent. We're going to talk to the winner of the 2000 Indianapolis Open. Now, why do I do it on Halloween night? It's just something that I would do. Hey, let's do it on the anniversary of your whatever title. I would do it on if I knew better, I would say to Danny Wiseman, hey, let's do it on whenever Halloween falls on a Sunday. Let's have you on Flush in the Pocket. But anyway, that's whatever. I just thought it would be really cool. Now, Doug Kent, he came from the 7 spot to go all the way through the field. All the way through. And he just owned them. I mean, he was the second bowler. He was the second bowler to ever go through the top 8. And I think there are only 2 to go from the first opening shootout all the way to the championship. If I remember right, there were only 2. It was him and it was Parker Bone. Parker did it in Chattanooga in the winter of 2000, right? So it's going to be an awesome telecast next week. It's going to be an awesome chat. I'm going to play a little prank on Doug just for fun because I am that way. So I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, but I will be removing shirts. I mean, I will be wearing a shirt but I will be having a lot of fun next Tuesday night. So yeah, be on the lookout for Doug Kent next Tuesday, Flush in the Pocket. Can't wait to do this. I can't wait to talk to him. He probably doesn't think that he's anything special, and talking to him is just like a normal, just like talking to any other normal human being. I get it, but there is no bigger honor in the world for me than to get a chance to talk to somebody like Doug Kent. So I can't wait to talk to Doug Kent next Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween night. I will have no trick-or-treaters, and it'll be good. So tune in. And this has been Flush in the Pocket, presented by Brunswick, sponsored by Just in Time Recreation. Check them out at justintimebowl.com. Just in Time Recreation on Facebook. Give them a call at 207-786-2695, 24 Mollison Way in Lewiston, Maine. Love those guys, Justin and Samantha. Do an amazing job. I love Samantha a little bit more because she's prettier. I'm just kidding, Justin. Hey, but thank you for all you do, and I can say that because they are those type of people. Justin's very fun to be around. He's serious when he has to be, but he's also very very lighthearted. So they both are. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next week when we talk to Wes Malott Monday night, and then a double dip Tuesday. We've got Doug Kent. So I can't wait. This has been Flush in the Pocket, presented by Brunswick, sponsored by Just in Time Recreation, justintimebowl.com. I'm Derek Michaud, and I'll see you next week.